Welcome to another deep dive, listeners. This time, we're stepping back into the Wild West to explore, well, I guess you could say a legend, the Colt Paterson revolver. Yeah, even for someone like me, not a huge gun person, the name Colt, it just has this, I don't know, mystique to it. But I gotta admit, when it comes to this particular model, my knowledge is a little dusty.
Well, you've come to the right place.
That's why I'm so excited to have a real firearms historian with us today to guide us through this chapter of history.
Happy to be here and share some of the passion I have for these amazing guns.
So I guess starting right at the beginning, what made the Colt Paterson, stand out back then? What was so revolutionary about it?
Well, imagine a time when, most guns were single shot. Each shot you had to reload. Slow, took forever. Then comes the Colt Paterson. Patented in 1836, it was the first commercially successful repeating firearm. And that was all because of its revolving cylinder.
Revolving cylinder.
Yeah, it had multiple chambers.
Oh.
And it aligned with a single stationary barrel. That meant multiple shots. No more constant reloading. Groundbreaking. Changed everything, really. When it comes to firearms, anyway.
Huh. It's kind of wild to think that something we take for granted today, the whole idea of a revolver, was once, something completely new.
Oh, it was a huge shift. It changed, well, not just guns, but the whole nature of fighting, too. Suddenly, you didn't need an army. Just one person with a Colt Paterson had unbelievable firepower. I mean, there's a reason for that famous saying, God created men equal. Colt made them equal.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I see what you mean about leveling the playing field. Speaking of leveling the playing field, I was looking at some diagrams of the Colt Paterson, and something's missing. There's no loading lever.
Ah, you noticed that.
Yeah, the original design, no lever. How'd they even reload that thing?
You had to take it apart, at least partially. Barrel off, cylinder out. Then you'd fill each chamber. By hand. Powder, then a lead ball.
Sounds pretty fiddly.
Oh, it was! And then put it all back together and hope it worked.
I bet. Especially, in a fight. Not exactly ideal.
No, not at all. Try reloading like that with, say, a bunch of Comanche warriors coming at you.
Yeah, no thanks. So this little design flaw, it got fixed eventually, right?
They added the lever in 1839. Simple, but genius. No more taking the whole thing apart to reload. And the best part, most of the older Colt Patersons, they got retrofitted.
Ah, good. So it was constantly evolving even back then, adapting to the people using it.
That's one thing about the Colt Paterson. It was always changing. And, one group that really took to it, pushed those changes, the Texas Rangers.
Texas Rangers. With Colt Patersons.
Yeah.
Like the ultimate Wild West image. I've always been interested in the Rangers, taming the frontier and all that. What was it about the Colt Paterson that fit them so well?
Think about what they faced. Outnumbered, constantly, huge open terrain, and their opponents. Experts on horseback, skilled warriors. The Colt Paterson, it gave them firepower. Multiple shots. Fast. That was a serious advantage.
Yeah, I can see how that would change things in a fight.
You're up against, let's say, Comanches. They have bows, maybe single-shot muskets.
Oh,
You've got a gun that fires 5 times in a row. Close combat. That's a game changer. It helped, even the odds in some pretty desperate situations.
Definitely. And wasn't there a battle? I think it was called the Battle of Bandera Pass back in 1841. I read that the Colt Paterson, it really made a difference there. What happened?
Oh, Bandera Pass is a perfect example. Rangers were outnumbered, badly, Comanches everywhere. But each ranger, they had 2 Colt Patersons. That's 10 shots, compared to single-shot weapons. Well, let's just say it showed just how powerful these repeating firearms could be and helped the Rangers win the day.
Wow, that's incredible. Just one invention changing the whole battle like that. So how strong were these Colt Patersons? I mean, compared to, say, a modern gun? Were they really that powerful?
It's a good question. It always helps to compare, To put things in context, the .36 caliber Colt Paterson, it's closer to a modern .380 pistol than you might think.
Really? I thought they'd be weaker, being so old.
They packed a punch. Similar size bullet, similar weight, speed's about the same. So stopping power, pretty close. Obviously, modern guns are, more accurate, more reliable, easier to use too. But for its time, the Colt Paterson was nothing to sneeze at.
So all those old westerns, cowboys hitting targets from horseback, pure Hollywood. Or was there some truth to that?
Hollywood loves to romanticize, right? The truth. A little more complicated. The Colt Paterson, it was accurate, in perfect conditions, but on a moving horse, in the middle of a fight, different story.
Yeah, I figured those sharpshooters were more fiction than reality, so how accurate was it really?
We've tested replicas, controlled conditions. 60 feet, the Colt Paterson can group shots about 2 to 3 inches apart. Not bad at all for a gun from that era.
That is pretty good.
But that's standing still. Add the recoil, the sights weren't great, and, well, a real gunfight isn't exactly calm, especially from horseback. So, could you hit something riding full speed? Maybe. More luck than skill, though.
That makes a lot more sense. So, here's a thought. If the Colt Paterson was so advanced, why didn't the U.S. Army just, adopt it right away?
Good question. It shows, well, how complicated things can be. Getting a new weapon into the military. The Army did buy some Colt Patersons. They were even used in the Second Seminole War. But they worried about, well, how tough it was.
Toughness. What was the problem?
Compared to later models, the Colt Paterson, kind of delicate, lots of small parts, springs, and prone to jamming, especially if you didn't take perfect care of it.
Yeah, exactly what you want for your soldiers, I guess.
Right. Some soldiers loved the firepower, but the government, they thought it was too fragile, too unreliable. That almost killed Colt's business, but, well, there's this one guy, Captain Samuel Walker. He changes everything.
Captain Walker. You've mentioned him a few times. I'm dying to hear more about him and, his part in this whole Colt Paterson story, but I think that'll have to wait for our next segment.
He's a key part of this whole story. His story really shows how one person with passion and dedication can change history. So Captain Walker, huh?
Yeah. He sounds like, I don't know, a real turning point for the Colt Paterson, maybe even for Colt himself.
He was Captain Samuel Walker, Texas Ranger, later a U.S. mounted rifleman. This guy, he really believed in Colt's revolvers, saw what they could do firsthand, fighting on the Texas frontier, especially against the Comanches.
Those close calls, those fights, having multiple shots, that must have been life-saving.
Absolutely. Walker, he saw the problems too. The Colt Paterson, it was fragile, could jam. But he also saw how brilliant the design was. He thought with a few tweaks, it could be the perfect weapon for the U.S. military.
So the Army, they weren't convinced, but he was. He saw past the flaws, saw the potential.
Yep. Walker, he was a man of action. 1846, Mexican-American War breaks out. He decides, you know what? I'm going to New York to meet Samuel Colt.
Wow, he went straight to the source. That's committal.
It was. Walker, he had this whole list of improvements. He wanted a bigger caliber, a stronger frame, a more reliable mechanism. Basically, a Colt Paterson, but bigger, tougher, better.
That's how the Walker Colt was born, right?
Exactly. Colt, he listened. They worked together, and bam, the Walker Colt. .44 caliber, a beast of a gun. The U.S. mounted rifles, they loved it.
It's amazing. One guy, Walker, his experience out on the frontier, he shapes a weapon that changes military history.
That's the thing. Listen to the people on the front lines. They know what works, what doesn't. Walker's ideas, they made a better gun, sure, but they also saved Colt's business. Things were rough after that first Colt Paterson.
So a Colt Paterson, flawed, yeah, but it paved the way. It's like the foundation for everything Colt did after. But before we get to those later models, let's get back to the Colt Paterson itself. You said there were different models. I thought it was just one design.
There were a bunch of variations, different sizes, different calibers, for different people, different needs. There were pocket models, small for hiding. Then bigger ones, belt models, holster models, meant to be seen.
So you could choose the one that fit your life.
You got it. One of the first times gun makers really made guns for specific types of people. And the calibers changed too. Early ones, mostly .28 caliber. Later, they went to .36. More powerful, more popular.
Was there like a classic Colt Paterson? The one everyone thinks of?
The number 5 holster model, sometimes called the Texas Paterson, that's the one. .36 caliber, made to be carried in a holster. The Texas Rangers, that was their favorite.
Makes sense, for guys on horseback all the time.
Exactly. Just the right mix of power and portability.
So we've got the Texas Rangers, the Army's Douse, all these different models. But did the Colt Paterson, did it ever become, the standard gun for the military?
Nope. The later Colts, the Walker Colt, the Dragoon, those became standard issue. But the Colt Paterson, not really. They only made it for about 6 years.
6 years. That's it for such a revolutionary gun.
A few reasons. It was fragile, unreliable, and, well, Colt's first company, Patton Arms Manufacturing Company. They went bankrupt in 1842.
Colt went bankrupt. So what happened then? Did he just give up on his guns?
Colt, he was a tough one. He knew he had something special. But it took the Mexican-American War and Captain Walker pushing for his guns. That gave Colt a second chance. The Walker Colt was a huge success, like we talked about.
White, the comeback story, shows that even the best ideas Sometimes they need a little push, a little bit of luck.
It does. The Colt Paterson, it's a reminder that, well, progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes there are bumps, detours. Gotta adapt, keep going. What do you think those old Colt Patersons are worth now? Imagine finding one tucked away, in your attic.
That'd be like hitting the jackpot, right?
More like finding a lost masterpiece. Those guns are super rare. Collectors go crazy for them. Priceless pieces of history. They mark a turning point in how guns were made.
I bet museums would pay a fortune for one.
They would. It's like owning a little piece of the Wild West. Cowboys, pioneers, taming the frontier.
It's wild. Something that was too fragile for the army is now a museum piece, a symbol of, well, innovation, ingenuity.
It is. People are fascinated by the history of guns. And, it shows that even imperfect inventions can change the world.
The skill it took to make those early guns, so complex, so innovative, and with the tools they had back then, amazing.
They were pioneers, those gunsmiths, pushing the limits. But there's another side to this, repeating firearms, the Colt Paterson. They changed things, not just technology. Society changed, too.
That's true. It's not just about the guns themselves. It's about how they changed the world. What were some of those changes? The unintended consequences, I guess.
Well, I guess the most obvious one, violence became more deadly. Repeating firearms, they shifted the balance, not just in wars, but in everyday life, too. Something that maybe would have been a fist fight or just knives, it could become a shootout. Someone could die.
So the Colt Paterson, it made the world a more dangerous place.
It's not that simple. The frontier was already a violent place, even without the Colt Paterson. It didn't, create violence. It just made the violence that was already there, well, worse. More people could get hurt more quickly.
It's the person behind the gun, right? Yeah. The technology itself, it's not good or bad. It's how it's used.
Exactly. Like any tool, it could be used for good or for bad. The Texas Rangers, they used it to bring some order to the chaos, but someone else. They might use it to hurt people, to commit crimes. It all depends.
With great power comes great responsibility. Especially when that power is, well, the power to kill.
That's the legacy of the Colt Paterson. Complicated. It's all tied up with violence, with how America expanded west, and it makes you think, about how humans and technology, how we're always changing each other, and we're still dealing with those changes even today with even more powerful guns.
This whole deep dive, it's been, well, really eye-opening. I knew a little about the Colt Paterson, but I had no idea how important it was. For guns, sure. But for America, for our history, even our culture.
It's an important story. The Colt Paterson, it changed everything. And yeah, maybe it wasn't perfect, but its story deserves to be, remembered, understood.
I agree. It's a story about, what? Innovation, ambition. And yeah, people just love guns. That's part of it too.
Yeah.
But it's also a warning, I think, about what happens when technology changes things. You have to be careful, use it wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that goes for all kinds of technology, not just guns.
So thank you, really, for joining us today, for sharing all this, well, this amazing knowledge. It's been a trip back in time, for sure.
Yeah, pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into the Colt Paterson has, made you curious about guns, about history. There's so much to learn out there. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep.